Let's continue. He gives us the second thing that he is very concerned about with Pope Francis, because again, Arroyo asks him for two things. Like, what are the two things that stand out to you? And gosh, I can give you way more than two criticisms of Pope Francis. But if I had to boil them down to two things, these wouldn't be the top two for me. They wouldn't even be in the top 10 compared to some other criticisms that I think we could offer of Pope Francis. But okay, let's listen to number two for Dr. Martin. Let's see how let's see what he says here.
Point, of course, was in the moral order. That interview that the Pope submitted to, that Disney later picked up and turned into a documentary. A bunch of kids are firing questions at the Vicar of Christ, and of course, they're all about sex. And the Pope pretty much gives the game away by saying that the Church's catechesis on sex is still in diapers.
He said the Church's catechesis on sex is still in diapers. Pay attention. Pay attention. He said the Church's catechesis is still in diapers. According to Martin. I'm not saying Pope Francis actually said that. Martin is saying that. Martin is presenting that way. And Arroyo is also complicit in this by not correcting it. Now, I want to note every single critic that I have seen, every critic of Pope Francis who has brought this up, every single one of them, not one of them has ever actually pulled the video up or read a transcript in context. Maybe they're out there. Maybe I just haven't seen it. But the ones that I've seen, not one of them has done that. And I kind of wonder why. I sincerely wonder why. Since that is not available, since people aren't making that available to people, I'm going to pull it up myself. What I did is I'm about to text it or email it to myself so I can pull it up here. And that way I can hopefully show you the video. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to read to you the transcript and play the audio, but I want to try to do the video itself. If I were to pull up the video on Hulu, it blacks it out, unfortunately. And so I didn't have to sit there and read the translation to you. I don't want to do that. So instead, what I did was, yeah, it's probably going to make me, might be too large to share. I might have to end up just playing the audio and then reading the translation to you. Let me try one more thing here. Anyways, I find it fascinating because if you try to show Hulu and play it, it just blacks it out. For some reason, it's able to figure out that like you're showing something on Hulu or Netflix and they black it out. So you have to sit there and just read it and make people listen to the audio, which is in Spanish anyway. So I'm going to try to upload this to Google Drive and then just pull it up here. I'm going to see if that works because they don't give you the context. And actually what Martin just said is factually false because again, pay attention. He said the Church's catechesis is in diapers. Is that what Pope Francis said? I'm going to show you what he said. And then I'm also going to show to you in context what he said. But let's first listen to the rest of what Martin said while this is also uploading.
Which seemed to me really insulting. I mean, the shade of Aquinas must be shaking to think that...
the shade of Aquinas must be shaking. So in other words, he sees what Pope Francis said here as a slight against Aquinas. And again, he presents it as the Church's teaching.
His moral theology was so infantile that we had to wait another 1,000 years for the kids in California to improve upon it.
And I'm going to show the video, hopefully. And then I'm going to ask, was Pope Francis talking again about the Church's catechesis? And number two, did he say anything about Aquinas? Anything about Aquinas? He just presented Pope Francis as presenting this as a diatribe against Aquinas. I'm pulling it up here right now. One second. Before I play it though, let's let his clip finish out here. Let's see here. Sorry. Okay. Let's see. I think it kicked out the other video that I was just playing, so let me pull it up again. Let's see, world over. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen and share it again and just finish out that part, and then I'm going to show you the video that I had to record to show you the context, which unfortunately they never give to you. Which I was shocked when this originally came out as a criticism of Pope Francis, because I watched the Hulu series before all of the detractors and critics came out. I watched it and I reviewed it, and I offered the good, bad, and the ugly, some criticisms and some praises. But this one was not a criticism that I had because I remembered the context. And when I saw people bringing this up as a criticism of Pope Francis, despite the context, I just thought, are you kidding me? Really? Wow. So you didn't actually pay attention to the context, did you? And I just kind of dismissed it. All right, these are just people who sloppy and are not, doing due diligence here, or are insincere. One of the two. But then I started noticing more and more people bringing this up, and I thought, gosh, really, none of y'all are reading the context? Not one of y'all? Are we really surprised? And then I started to see Martin with this in the last few days, and of course, he doesn't show you the context. But let's let that part play out.
That as regards religion, this documentary, a bunch of kids are firing questions at the Vicar of Christ, and of course, they're all about sex. And the Pope pretty much gives the game away by saying that the Church's catechesis on sex is still in diapers, which seemed to me really insulting. I mean, the shade of Aquinas must be shaking to think that his moral theology was so infantile that we had to wait another 1,000 years for the kids in California to improve upon it. I found that very offensive.
Yeah, no, I think, Dr. Martin, you and I may be the only two people who actually sat through that spectacle. I mean,
and thus both of these gentlemen are culpable for bearing false witness, because by his own admission, he watched it and he didn't correct it. I'm going to show it to you, since they didn't do it. Let's see here. Pull it back up. Let's see. Oh, I think I got it. Hold on. Let me play it on a different player here to see if it will show video. Yes. Okay, success. Now, let's see if it actually works when I try to share my screen, or if somehow they figured out how to black the screen out on this one too. Let's see. Okay. Oh, okay, you can see it. All right, because it's literally me recording my TV. So I figured out a way around a way around the problem. Okay, here we go. She says they're talking about masturbation, and one girl was saying this is wrong, another girl was saying it's right. And this lady is saying, well, I just think it's a common thing. And so Pope Francis intervenes and offers his clarification. All right, let's watch.
Yo creo que la gran mayoría ha llegado a su adolescencia y se ha masturbado, ¿no?
All right, so Pope Francis interrupts and he says, at this point, I would like to mention a criterion that will keep us from losing ourselves in some labyrinths. Sex is one of the beautiful things God gave human beings. To express oneself sexually is something rich. Anything that diminishes a true sexual expression
disminuya la real expresión sexual, te
diminishes you as well. It renders you partial and diminishes that richness.
disminuye a vos también, te parcializa y te empobrece esa riqueza, ¿no? O sea, el sexo tiene
Sex has a dynamic of its own. It exists for a reason. It's an expression of love.
su dinámica, tiene su razón de ser. La expresión del amor es probablemente
That's probably the core of sexual activity.
el punto central de la actividad sexual. Entonces, todo aquello
So anything that drags you away from that,
que te lo tire para otro lado y que te lo saque de esa
or that pulls it in a different direction, diminishes sexual activity.
dirección, te disminuye la actividad sexual. A veces
Now, pay attention. Pay attention to what happens next. He's about to speak about someone in the confessional. So we're talking about a penitent and their understanding of this issue. That's important. You'll see why. He says, sometimes while hearing confession, some people say, I've done something nasty.
en la confesión, escuchar a alguno que te dice, hice cosas feas, ¿no?
Sexual things, instead of saying, I handled sexuality poorly.
Son cosas de sexo, ¿no? En vez de decir, manejé mal mi sexo, que en vez de amarme busqué a mí mismo,
Instead of loving another, I sought myself.
en vez de esto. O sea, la catequesis sobre el sexo todavía está en pañales.
Catechism, hold on. Missed it. Catechism regarding sex is still at a very early stage. Now, that's the way they translate it. Maybe others are going for more of a formal equivalency. I don't know. And maybe the formal equivalent would be it's in diapers. Maybe that's fine. I mean, perhaps that's what Pope Francis is saying. He's saying catechism regarding sex is still at a very early age. I didn't hear anything about ecclesia in there. I mean, I don't know Italian very well, but I'm pretty sure that some variant of that would be church. Ecclesia, I'm sure some variant of that, something similar, a cognate would be what church is in Italian. And I didn't hear anything about that in there. So earlier we heard Martin say the church's catechesis is infantile, is in diapers, is at an early stage. I didn't hear anything about church in there. But in fact, what I heard was the context was a person's catechetical knowledge. Who was this person? The person in the confessional. The person in the confessional is expressing a deficient catechetical knowledge of sexuality. And Pope Francis critiques that person in the confessional and says, here is a better understanding of sexuality. And in that context, catechism regarding sex is still at a very early stage. What is he saying? He's not saying the church's catechetical literature is at an early stage. He's not saying the church's catechesis or Aquinas's catechesis. No, he's saying an understanding of catechesis on part of many of these people, especially in the confessional, is at an early stage. That was the context. And I knew that was the context, which is why I was shocked that all these public figures started coming out and throwing Pope Francis under the bus. And I thought, gosh, did any of you actually watch what he said? It's no wonder you're not quoting him in context. It's no wonder you're not either providing the video or transcript. No wonder. Because if you did that, people would then see, wait, he wasn't talking about the church's catechesis. He was talking about the catechetical knowledge of some of these penitents. And in that sense, catechism regarding sex is still at a very early stage. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Not the catechetical literature, but people's knowledge of sex. Yeah. There's a lot of, feet on the ground. There's a lot of Catholics out there that have a great deal of misunderstanding about sex. And they see it as in and of itself intrinsically wrong. Now we say that's ridiculous. I mean, God created sex as a good thing. And you're right, absolutely. And the church teaches that. And that's in our catechetical literature. But there's a lot of people out there who kind of have that impression that somehow the church is saying that sex itself is wrong. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying it needs to be in the proper context and rightly ordered. That's all we're saying. But some of these people don't understand that. And that's one of the things he's criticizing of this penitent. So my question is, if Arroyo and Martin, according to Arroyo, watched the documentary, how are they without excuse in bearing false witness against Pope Francis? Because they said the church's catechesis, according to Pope Francis, is in diapers. And he did not say the church's catechesis. He was talking in context of a penitent. Let's watch it one more time. I'll actually let the video play out. Let it finish out so you see the rest of the context, which doesn't change anything I said. And then I'll play it one more time and walk you through it again. And then I want to one more time play what Martin said. And that way you can really get to see the difference between what Pope Francis said and what the accusers are saying. So Reason in Theology is growing as a channel. As a result, there's been a number of increases in production costs. So if you're benefiting from RNT, I ask that you consider supporting the channel. You can help out by contributing to the Help RNT Grow fundraiser on GoFundMe. You could also consider becoming a member on Patreon at patreon.com/Reason in Theology, or become a channel member right here on YouTube. With either of these options, Patreon or a YouTube member, you'll get extra access to patron-only content. You can also donate directly to RNT at PayPal if you prefer that option. And you can find links to all of these resources and ways to support RNT in the show description. God bless. I think we Christians haven't always had a mature catechism regarding sex. Oh, that seems to work with my interpretation, doesn't it? Because that's true. There's a great deal of Christians out there who again see sex as somehow sex itself is wrong. And that's not true. It just needs to be properly ordered and in the proper context.
No siempre hemos tenido una catequesis madura sobre el sexo. Y es una de las cosas
It's one of the beautiful things God has done.
bellas que hizo Dios.
All right, and then this other lady then wants to change the topic. But let's again play that part again. We're going to watch it again. I'm going to explain it to you play by play. And then we're going to watch what Martin said. Somebody said it works for both interpretations, though. No, it does not. No, it does not. Because in the context, he's talking about a penitent. He is not talking about the church's catechesis itself. He's not talking about the catechetical literature. There's nothing in there that says that. But everything in the context is about the penitent. So no, it does not work for both ways. Upon what basis do you say that? You would have to say he's saying something about the catechetical material itself. He nowhere says that. But he's specifically talking about penitents and their misunderstanding of catechesis. It does not work both ways. And I'm shocked that you could sit here and watch what I just showed you and still say that. Let's watch it again. Maybe you'll get it this time around. To express oneself is sexually rich. Anything that diminishes a true sexual expression diminishes you as well. It renders you partial and it diminishes that richness. Logos Project is saying Christopher West made the exact same point you're making, Michael. Good to know. I have not seen his response to it. Like I said, I have not seen all responses, but the ones that I have seen, they weren't playing the context. Now, if Christopher West put out the context and got it right, great for Christopher West. I haven't seen that. I'm thinking of more other individuals that I have in mind here, including the two gentlemen that I'm reviewing here. Sex has a dynamic of its own. It exists for a reason. It's an expression of love.
Tiene su razón de ser. La expresión del amor es probablemente
That's probably the core of sexual activity.
el punto central de la actividad sexual. Entonces, todo aquello
So anything that drives you away from that,
que te lo tire para otro lado y que te lo saque de esa dirección, te disminuye la actividad
or that pulls it in a different direction, diminishes sexual activity. And here's the part.
sexual. A veces en la confesión,
Sometimes while hearing confessions, some people say. He's not talking about catechetical literature. He's not talking about what we have available as far as resources. He's not talking about the magisterium of the church. He's not talking about Aquinas.
Escuchar alguno que te dice, hice
Sometimes while hearing confessions, some people say, I've done something nasty.
cosas feas, ¿no? Y vos son cosas
Sexual things instead of saying, I handled sexuality poorly. So what he's trying to say is that he's trying to indicate that sexual activity itself is not wrong. It's not nasty. It just needs to be in the proper context. And I have a little criticism here because I might ask, well, what exactly are they calling nasty? Because some people could maybe misunderstand what he's saying there. So I would have to get a little bit more context of what Pope Francis is saying, but I know what he's overall trying to communicate. I know his heart here. I know what he's trying to communicate. The context is he's trying to say that sexual activity in and of itself is not wrong or sinful or nasty. It just needs to be in the right context. Otherwise it is disordered and it is wrong. But they're under the impression that somehow in and of itself it is disordered and nasty. And he wants to say, no, it's a good thing. It's created by God. It just needs to be in the right context. And in that sense, we do have a lot of work to do. There's just so many people who have that misimpression about what the church teaches.
de sexo, ¿no? En vez de decir, manejé mal mi sexo, que en vez de amarme busqué a mí mismo,
Instead of loving one another, I sought myself.
en vez de esto. O sea, la catequesis sobre el sexo todavía
Catechism regarding sex is still at a very early stage. Let's listen to it one more time.
está en pañales. Creo que los cristianos no siempre hemos tenido una catequesis.
I think we haven't always had a mature catechism regarding sex. Let me play it one more time.
Todavía está en pañales. Creo que los cristianos no siempre hemos esto. O sea, la catequesis sobre el sexo, en vez de amarme busqué a mí mismo, en vez de esto. O sea, la catequesis sobre el sexo todavía está.
Catechism regarding sex is still at a very early stage. Again, I didn't hear anything in Spanish. I'm sorry, I think I said Italian earlier. No, he was actually speaking in Spanish to my recollection in the documentary. And again, it would be some cognate of ecclesia, I'm sure in Spanish as well. And so I don't hear any cognate of that in there. I don't hear anything about the church in there. All he's saying, again, is catechism regarding sex is still at a very early stage, or is in diapers, in relation to understandings of catechesis on part of penitents who think that somehow sexuality in and of itself is wrong and nasty. That was the context. How did people not get that? Why is this still an issue? How long has this been out? And they haven't been able to read the context and watch the context and dispel this misinformation at this point? Why is this still being brought up? Again, by gentlemen who claim that they watched the context. So again, my question is, now that it has been pointed out that one is bearing false witness if they repeat this lie, that somehow Pope Francis is attacking the catechetical literature itself, or Thomas Aquinas, now that has been pointed out, and once a person becomes aware of that, let's say Arroyo or Dr. Martin, my question is, will they offer a formal apology and retraction and correction? And if not, upon what basis can they continue to criticize Pope Francis for not doing the same? They don't have any basis at that point. They're no different. In fact, they would be worse. Because in the case of Pope Francis, he may not be clarifying some ambiguities. However, in their case, they would then not be clarifying instances where they have borne false witness. Let's see here. Let me actually go to the video again and play what Martin says. So now that you have the context, you get to see his take on it. And then again, tell me if you think it is a fair take in light of what we've seen. All right. And thank you. I appreciate the clarification here. He said, yeah, the previous context makes your interpretation more accurate. I stand corrected. Thank you. I can deal with people like you who will at least admit, hey, I was wrong. I've been wrong too. I appreciate that. You and I can have a reasonable discussion. But for people who continue to still insist, in spite of all the evidence that, oh no, he's still talking about Aquinas in the church's catechetical literature, I can't do anything. I can't have a productive conversation with such unreasonable people at that point, in spite of the evidence to the contrary. You can't have a rational conversation with somebody who at that point is very clearly intentional in trying to misrepresent Pope Francis for some ulterior motive. All right, let's watch it one more time.
California to improve upon it. I found this was in the moral Christ, this as indispensable as he once was.
And again, remember, these are the top two things for Martin, which I've shown on this show, and really I've even shown elsewhere, the issue with the God wills, the plurality of religions, that these are misplaced criticisms. The top two criticisms that he have are misplaced. What does that say maybe about Regis Martin's analysis of this pontificate?
If we have other equally legitimate voices, and the other flashpoint, of course, was in the moral order. That interview that the Pope submitted to, that Disney later picked up and turned into a documentary. A bunch of kids are firing questions at the Vicar of Christ, and of course, they're all about sex. And the Pope pretty much gives the game away by saying that the church's catechesis on sex is still in diapers, which seemed to me really insulting. I mean, the shade of Aquinas must be shaking to think that his moral theology was so infantile that we had to wait another 1,000 years for the kids in California to improve upon it.
Why strawman Pope Francis like that? Why do that? Where is this coming from? Where is it coming from? It didn't come from what he actually said. So I do have to ask the question, where is this coming from? What's the motives behind this?
I found that very offensive.
Yeah, no, I think, Dr. Martin, you and I may be the only two people who actually sat through that spectacle. I mean,
that's a damning statement. It would have been better if he had not said that, because then we could maybe think that, well, maybe they didn't see the context and they're just negligent. But you can't say they're negligent, because at least Arroyo is saying that he says both of them, but he can only speak for himself unless he knows for a fact that Martin actually watched it. That's a damning statement, because you know better. You know the context. You heard the context. So I had them at that point. It boils down to two things. Since you've seen the context, it either is that one is intentionally trying to misrepresent Pope Francis. That's one option. Or they're not intentionally trying to misinterpret Pope Francis, but they have very poor comprehension skills. It's one of the two. I don't know which one is worse, bearing false witness or having such poor comprehension skills. I'll let you decide which one is worse. But I think those are the only two options at this point for Arroyo and everybody else who has seen the context and still continues to persist with this. Hey, pro-lifers, I want to remind you about realestateforlife.org. If you want to support the pro-life movement at no cost to you in the process of buying a home or selling a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, check out realestateforlife.org for more information. God bless. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button. See you next time. God bless.